Turns out the KU running game is just fine. In fact, it's probably pretty good. Plus, this might be the best special teams unit. In fact, definitively, it is the best special teams unit of the Lance Leipold era. We get into the biggest takeaways from KU's 31-point victory over the West Virginia Mountaineers.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. And thank you so much to the everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe. And on today's edition of LOJ, we are breaking down the KU West Virginia game even more. We're going to get to our goats of the game. We're going to get to an early look at Cincinnati, a promise this time. And our three biggest takeaways from KU taking down West Virginia, including about the special teams, including about third downs and the running game for KU. Today's episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. So KU takes down West Virginia 41-10. It was an impressive outing for KU. And I think from a big picture perspective, you feel really good that Kansas obviously bounces back the Missouri win, wins off a bye week, starts Big 12 play 1-0. But that all your wins so far this season have been blowout wins. Like that feels even better, that it's not just these close wins, that it's like, is this going to last over the course of the season? It feels like something that is very sustainable. But one of the big questions you had coming out of the Missouri game was, what was the running game going to be for KU football moving forward the rest of this season? And it was hard to see this team, especially given how much they want to run the football, how much they want to be a balanced offense, how important it is for how they play their style of ball. And I mean, just in general in football, of course, it's important to run the football. It was going to be important to figure that out. And so you come off that Missouri game in where you have just 31 rushing yards against the Tigers. And it was a real question of, okay, it's not just about, hey, this was not a good game. It's about, is this indicative that they might have a problem running the football, right? To where, yes, if you're playing a worse opponent, you have more than 31 rushing yards. But if you only have 100 rushing yards when you need to be averaging 150, 180, 200 in a specific game, that still would be a problem. Well, you ended up with over 200 against West Virginia. It was not a problem. And I think now it's much easier as we add more data points. It's not just the Kansas data points, it's the Missouri defense data points. As we add more data points here, it's a lot easier to kind of look at this thing and go, you know what? I think Kansas might actually have a pretty good rushing game. I don't know that it's last year's rushing game, but you lost your all-time leading rusher in Devin Neal. So like there is going to be a certain level of, okay, I can understand that a little bit here. When you look at Kansas running the football in every other game besides the Missouri game, they've been able to, again, it's not always the most flashy. It's not always 10 yards per carry, but they've found a way to get a bunch of yards. In their first game against Fresno State, they finished with 207 rushing yards. And had Kansas continued with their playbook and their starters, you probably end up with more after you kind of just, from the third quarter on, just kind of sat on it. You end up with 285 rushing yards against Wagner, and a lot of that comes with the second and third strings in the game. You end up with 242 rushing yards against West Virginia. And even then, you're bringing in backups into the end of the game. So that means that if you take out the Missouri game, Kansas is averaging 245 rushing yards per game. That is a very, very good number. Turns out they're going to be just okay rushing the football. And when you look at like Fresno State so far this season, Fresno State gave up 207 rushing yards to Kansas in that week 0 contest. The 3 games after against Georgia Southern, Oregon State, and Southern combined, they gave up 235. So they only gave up 28 more total rushing yards than they gave up in the one game against Kansas than they did the following 3 games, obviously not counting the last game against Hawaii. But the Missouri game, the more we get data points on them too, I think it becomes an outlier in terms of you having the 31 rushing yards. And yes, is it concerning if you play another defensive line to the level of Missouri's? Sure, it is. But maybe KU will be better and be better equipped because they've gone that experience this time, that they'll be able to handle a little bit better. But go check out the box score for Missouri against South Carolina. South Carolina had -9 rushing yards against Missouri. That was not a mistake. The Gamecocks had -9 rushing yards against Missouri. Now, obviously in college football, sacks count for negative. Even if you take away the sack yardage that they had, it's a horrible rushing game for South Carolina. And South Carolina is known for being a rushing team. They want to run their quarterback, Lenora Sellers, is one of the best rushing quarterbacks in the country. They could not run at all against Missouri. So it turns out Missouri's defensive line and defenses are really, really good at stopping the run. You probably had a bad game at the same point in time, and you'll probably be better equipped from it, and they're going to learn from it and be better from it moving forward. The other games, you've been fine. So I also really like Leshon Williams. I really like his vision. I really like the added juice he brings to the offense as a runner. I know obviously Daniel Highshaw is hurt right now, and you hope that he can get back and healthy. I do think it would behoove Kansas to moving forward, even when you do get Highshaw back, fully healthy. I think you're looking at either an equal split or I wouldn't even hate if let's say you had 25 carries to give out. If you give out, 14 of them to Leshon Williams, 10 of them, that's horrible math, 11 of them to Daniel Highshaw or something. I think I would be okay with that. So I think the run game is going to be just fine for KU. Let's get to a negative, I guess you could say, takeaway. KU still needs to figure out their third downs if they want to win some of the games that are going to be closer. It hasn't mattered right now because the games that they've won have been in such blowout fashion that it's not, that small stuff. But if you're looking at winning the games that are going to be closer, which you might have one this week against Cincinnati, certainly Vegas thinks that way when you look at how the spread is kind of closing. You're going to have to start converting third downs at a higher clip. So far this season, Kansas is just 14 of 45 on third downs. That's 31%. They were 5 of 14 last week against West Virginia. So the number went up, but not monumentally. Kansas is only in the 11th percentile nationally in late down success rate. That's despite being in the 94th percentile nationally in average third down distance. So they're getting really, really short third downs, but they're not converting them nonetheless. And that is a problem right now. Now, the good news for Kansas is you would think that based on the average down and distance, those numbers are bound to go up. You would think that based on it being a short third down, you should eventually reversion to the mean, have a higher third down conversion percentage. You also should think based on the last 3 years' performance that KU should get back to being a good third down team. In 2024, Kansas converted 51% on third down. It was 48% in 2023, and it was 51% again in 2022. Kansas has been a very good third down conversion team the last 3 years. Even when the Jeff Grimes offense was here last year, that hasn't been the case this year, even though they're getting even shorter third downs. So that to me almost doesn't make sense and tells me that there's going to be a run here for KU, that the third downs are going to come, and they're going to have a 2 or 3 game stretch where they do convert at 60%, and that number, jumps up. But you still got to do it. You still got to make it happen. And, up until it does happen, you do have to at least question, okay, what is going on here? What is leading to this lapse? Because again, when you get to the closer games, when you get to the even bigger games against the better opponents, you're going to have to figure out those third downs if you want to win those contests. The last one here, this is the best KU special teams of the Lance Leipold era. And I'm not sure it's particularly close because it's better in every area so far for Kansas. I guess I didn't take a look at some of the coverage numbers so far, but I guess to this point, Kansas hasn't given up kicker, punt, return, touchdown. You would hope that would continue. But if we're just talking about who is the best kick returner of the Lance Leipold era, Kenny Logan has the 2 best yards per kick return average in the Lance Leipold era. There was one guy who in 1 year had 1 kick return for 30 yards. So technically it'd be him, but more than 1 return, which is a better realistic way of looking at it. Kenny Logan owns the previous high of a Lance Leipold season at 27.9 yards per kick return. That was back in 2021. Well, right now, Emmanuel Henderson is at 36 yards per kick return, so blowing that out of the water. He had the first kick return for a touchdown of the Lance Leipold era in the win against West Virginia. So you would say right now, the best kick returner of the Lance Leipold era is what Emmanuel Henderson is doing. And obviously you have to continue this stuff to finish out with this, but so far, the best punt returner so far, Kwame Lassiter had 8 for 108 yards in 2021. Tate Nagy has 12 for 95 this year. So by an efficiency, basis, Lassiter would have him there. But it's the consistency of those 12 punt returns where think about every time you're returning it, it's not just that you have the chance of gaining yards forward. It's that you're preventing the ball from bouncing backwards. And the consistency of how often Nagy is getting to return punts and picking up just a few extra yards here or there. Again, 12 punt returns. We're talking about that Lassiter had 8 of them in 2020. Kansas last year had a total of, 2024, last year, Kansas had 55 punt return yards. In 2023, they had 119. In 2022, they had 15. In 2021, they had 108. You were on pace to shatter all of those years. If you look at it from a perspective, what is Tate Nagy on pace for, right? You take the 4 games he's played, multiply it by 3 to get to a 12-game pace. Tate Nagy right now is on pace for 285 punt return yards. That means that Tate Nagy is on pace to have more punt return yards in 2025 than Kansas had as a team combined from 2022 through 2024. That is important in gaining new field position. And then the best kicker on paper, Lathan Marjan is 21 of 22 in his career between last year and this year now at Kansas. He already has a long of 47 at KU. He's 3 for 3 on kicks between 40 to 49 yards. The most kicks that a KU kicker has ever made in a season from between 40 and 49 yards in the Lance Leipold era is 4. Jacob Borchilla did that, 4 of them in 2022, but he's also 4 for 6. He was 1 for 3 the 4 for 6 was 2021. He was 1 for 3 in 2022. Seth Keller was 2 for 4. Tabor Allen was 3 for 4. So, I mean, you're already on pace to, break those very easily. And then the best punter, the best punt average in the Lance Leipold era before this year was Damon Graves in 2024. It was 42.3. Finn Lappin's at 47.8. Blowing it out of the water. And in fact, 47.8, if Finn Lappin continues that for the full season, that would be the Kansas single season record for best yards per punt in a single season. So, best special teams of the Lance Leipold era. It's got to continue this way. It's got to keep going this way if you want to finish with that title. But to this point, very, very promising for KU. And yet still, I'm worried about it in the game against K-State. All right, let's get to our goats of the game and a little early look at Cincinnati. This is Locked on Jayhawks. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by The Game Cap. Quick question for all the college football fans out there. If you could go back in time and sit front row at your biggest rivalry game, what hat would you be wearing? Yes, I said hat. For me, it would be the game. These aren't just hats. These are the same vintage styles that fans wore back in the 80s and 90s. And guess what? They'll still go for the same price that they did back then. When you use code LOCKED ON to get your vintage hat for just $16.99. Head to thegamecaps.com, grab your team's classic bar or retro circle design, and use code LOCKED ON for an exclusive discount, because legends wear the game. Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Locked on Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And, again, don't forget you can check out Locked on College Football or Locked on College Basketball for your second listen every day. Okay, so KU wins 41-10, and it's time to get to our goats of the game. If you're new to the segment, good goats, greatest of all time, kind of the new adage of the word. Bad goats is the old adage of the word. It was kind of the shortened version of like scapegoats in a way. Like you didn't want to be a goat when I was growing up, and now obviously you do. So a little bit different in how those are. Our good goats, let's just start with the defense overall. I mean, you only give up 10 points, and 7 of it was to a backup quarterback who comes in running the football really well when you're not fully prepared for that, and you have backups in as well. Really impressive performance by the KU defense overall. And it really was a little bit of everything. Like the coverage was obviously solid for KU. The run defense was really good. It seemed like you were plugging up a lot over the middle. I mean, you forced like 6 punts on the first 6 drives for West Virginia. It was just a really all-around performance. The linebackers, once again, looked really good for Kansas. So it really is a little bit of everything. Now, if we did have to try to pick some standouts here, let's start with Jalen Dye. He had an 84 PFF grade. That actually led Kansas. It was only 22 snaps. And again, he's playing with some of the backups, but that was nice to see because KU had a couple safety injuries. Taylor Davis coming into the game. I guess Devin Dye wasn't an injury. That was him getting suspended for the targeting call. But point being, that was nice to see in what he brought to the table. And KU's safety depth continues to look pretty good so far this season. So that was good. Trey Lathan, he had an interception against his former team, had an 83 PFF grade, really good coverage grade, picked up some tackles, had a sack in there as well. Like just did a little bit of everything. He's been an awesome linebacker addition for KU out of the portal. Dean Miller, I kind of mentioned earlier, like he was playing, in fact, PFF lists him as a left outside outside linebacker. He was kind of playing that hybrid outside linebacker D-end role. It was so fun to watch with what DK McDonald is doing right now. He had an 81 PFF grade. He had 2 pressures for the game. He had 6 total tackles, according to PFF. I think the official stats gave him 7. Really impressive game. And again, he set the tone. That first drive of the game, West Virginia has like the 3rd and 3. He makes the open field tackle where it's one-on-one with him and Nico Markiel. Really impressive there. Justice Finkley had his best game at KU, 81 PFF grade. He had 3 pressures for the game, and he also was key in run defense with a 77 run defense grade. So you look at Finkley coming along. I mean, we like the KU defensive tackles. We like what you have at D-end with Leroy Harris and Dean Miller. You get Finkley and Bray playing to the level that we were expecting preseason, which Finkley did in this game, and you end up with a game just like this. Lyric Rawls obviously had the hit of the game for KU, blowing up that receiver. He had a 77 PFF grade, 82 in coverage, so he would be another standout here. Saeed Gibbs, he ended up playing more and played 48 snaps because of the injury with Taylor Davis. He had a 75.5 PFF grade, 76 in coverage, so he stood out, and he made a couple nice hits in run coverage as well, kind of coming up for KU. Again, there's just so many players here on the defense with how well it played, but this kind of proves the point of what happened here. The defensive tackles, again, like this game, it was Withers and Dunn who were the players who kind of flashed. Harold flashed with a bunch of, tackles, and those 3 players, or I'm sorry, no, it'd be Harold, Dunn, and then Marcus Calvin even had a flash play too. Those 3 players had 5 combined pressures for KU from D tackles, so it's just everyone in terms of D tackles. And then I would also shout out Jalen Todd. Again, I don't think any of the corners played like poorly necessarily, but I thought it was just a ho-hum solid day. There's not one that jumps out on PFF. The highest rated for the corners is Jalen Todd, which they're all solid grades. Like he's a 70.2, but Todd definitely deserves some credit here. He was targeted 4 times. Again, I think the grade should actually be higher here based on this. 4 targets against him, 13 yards. That's like 3 yards a target with 2 pass breakups. That's actually a really good game for a corner to have for Jalen Todd there. Felt like, again, continuing with the theme of the defense, like a good tackling game. I think Pro Football Focus listed 12 missed tackles for KU. That felt high. I think a lot of those happened late. It felt like when the game really mattered early, KU was tackling really well. Kind of the opposite of the Fresno State game, where you struggle to tackle early and then you finish doing so late. Kind of the opposite in this one, which you get some of the backups in there, and I guess I can see how that would kind of happen. I think really good at preventing explosive plays. That was obviously a part of it, of doing it, but KU did not really get beat on explosives until the big runs by Henderson. Leshon Williams gets a good goat here for KU, obviously well over 100 yards. That's 62-yard run, man. It's such a good highlight for him, but he was consistent and solid all game long. And then the KU offensive line, they only had 1 TFL. They had 0 sacks in the game. And again, if we're looking at like in the same way of the offense or the defense, who were the standouts? Well, Enrique Cruz had a 79 PFF grade, 80 in pass block, 75 in run block. Amir Herring had a 71 PFF grade, 69 in pass block, 71 in run block. So they were both consistent at both. And then also the highest pass blocker for KU was Tavaki Tuikolovatu, 81 pass block grade for the left guard in 33 snaps. So I find this funny that, again, we have another game where the 2 positions on the offensive line that were kind of the ones in question, the ones in rotation, who's going to play for KU, have been consistently getting some really good flash performances from some of these guys. By the way, Cruz was the highest run blocker for the offensive lineman. Actually, Doug Emelian was the highest graded run blocker for KU overall. Okay, what about bad goats from this one? I would say, like, I think Jalen had a solid game overall. I mean, obviously you throw 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. You make some stuff happen in the pocket to avoid on the occasions that West Virginia was able to, kind of get pressure or force the issue here. It felt like there were a few more inaccurate throws than normal for Jalen in this one, and the completion percentage would kind of back that up. That's just something that you're looking to tighten up moving forward, but we've seen tightened up from Jalen in the past. Maybe just a little bit of rust had to be shaken off after the bye week, but they need it more moving forward and against Cincinnati this week. They also need to get another receiver going. Emmanuel Henderson had 6 catches. There were some big plays for some of the other guys, but nobody had more than 1 catch. And I looked to Cam Pickett, who, again, he's playing banged up. He played just 23 snaps in this game, wasn't able to make a big impact for KU. I looked to Bryson Canty, who I was hoping we would see a big jump up after the bye week. And we did see a jump up. It was the most snaps played, 27 of them. He had the 1 catch in the end too. If you can get Canty and Pickett, or, pick your other 2 receivers going at the same time you get Henderson going. And again, part of it is injury based. Like you can only control so much there. I think it'll really open things up and make things more consistent for the KU passing offense, but you still are trying to find that right now. I also remain steadfast in the long term of Calvin Clements. I think there's a lot of good that he does, and I think he's going to be an all-conference player when it's all said and done at Kansas. But there still are some worries there. I kind of brought up some of the numbers coming in of some of the pass blocking grade that was a little scary. He only had a 17 pass block grade in this game, so you need to continue to find improvement there from the young left tackle who has a very high ceiling. And I think will hit it eventually at Kansas. I continue to make that Bryce Cable-Do comparison and what he was able to do by the time he was all said and done at Kansas. But it does take time. And, unfortunately for Clements, he has to kind of grow up maybe a year earlier than you might have hoped for. And then I would just say rust, like maybe the passing stuff. I would say some of the guys coming back from injury struggled a bit, like Sip, Keys, Brinkley. Those were 3 of KU's 4 lowest graded players by Pro Football Focus on the defense side of the ball. I think there's something to the idea of coming up back. I mean, it's got to be tough. It's the 4th game for a lot of other people. And like for Keys and Sip, it's your first game back. Like you're just not going to be in the flow of things as well. So not something that I'm worried about long-term, but in this specific game, it was something that I did think probably impacted their performance, but something that, moving forward, like I'm expecting those guys, okay, once they get that rust shaken off, they're going to be impactful players for KU. All right, let's finish up a little early look at the Bearcats of Cincinnati. Today's episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. That's a lot of bonus bets you can use for the upcoming MLB postseason. NHL and NBA season are getting ready to go at it. Obviously, we got college football. We got NFL going on. You can still get futures. Darren Peterson plus 850 to win the Wooden Player of the Year award. You can still get Kansas at 25-1 to win the national championship over on FanDuel. So you're ready to play. Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Today's episode of the show is also brought to you by Square. Your favorite neighborhood spots run on Square. There are certain businesses that truly make the neighborhood feel like home. And whether it's the local sports bar, it's packed on game days, your favorite coffee shop that knows your order, corner deli that's, always serving up that great lunch. There's places that bring people together. And when neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood thrives. Those local spots are what makes the neighborhood feel like home. And so many of them run on Square. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. And that is especially true right here in Lawrence. You can go to square.com/go/lockedoncollege to learn more. Square.com/go/lockedoncollege to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square, see you in the neighborhood. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Again, you can find our show anywhere you get podcasts, including on our YouTube page. We're going to be joined by Henry Greenstein on tomorrow's episode. Does great work with KUSports.com, Lawrence Journal World. So we're going to talk some more KU football takeaways from Henry so far in this season. On tomorrow's episode, we get to our Cincinnati talk later throughout the week as well. But here is an early preview of the Bearcats. So they come into this game 2-1. Their lone loss of the season was a close one it was a neutral site game against Nebraska, played at Arrowhead. But I mean, it was like all Nebraska fans. I guess like Travis Kelce and Jason Kelce were there to support Cincinnati. I'm sure there were some Bearcat fans, but it was mostly Nebraska fans. They filled that place out hard. So it was basically a road game, a tough environment, and they made it close against a solid Nebraska team. This is a really good running team in Cincinnati that, you look at the overall numbers and it's like, they're 10th in the country in EPA per play passing, but a lot of that has been done over their last 2 games when they played weaker opponents, when they played against Bowling Green and when they played against Northwestern State. If you just look to the Nebraska game, the passing game was a problem for the Bearcats. In fact, they finished 12th percentile in that game in EPA per dropback, but they finished 98th percentile that game in EPA per rush. And again, overall in the season, they're passing the ball well. I do think they're a better passing team than just the Nebraska game, but they're probably not as good of a passing team as the overall numbers show from those last 2 games. 39th in EPA per play rushing. Again, that's worse than the passing, but the way that I view it, I'm kind of viewing it as they're a better rushing team than passing team against the better teams. But still, a good team overall. The defensive side of the ball, they have struggled against the pass, 102nd in the country in EPA per play allowed defensively. So getting that consistency for KU throwing the football, again, going back to the accuracy stuff, that'll be really important in this game, because if you can be on time, on schedule, I think there's a lot there you can get on the back end. They are a very good rushing defense, though, 16th in the country in EPA per play against the run. That is something that Kansas is going to, again, we get back to one of our takeaways here. Kansas is going to be just fine running the football. This might be a tougher running game, but if you can do it again against Cincinnati, the more we'll look back at that Missouri game and just say, yeah, turns out Missouri just, I know you don't want to tip your cap to Missouri, but you kind of just do in what their defense had. So it'll certainly be an interesting one, because I think it opened as like a 5.5 point line in favor of KU. And now it's already down. That means bettors are coming in on Cincinnati early. The same thing that helped Kansas coming in the West Virginia game was that they had a bye week. West Virginia was coming off a rivalry game. Now, Kansas doesn't have the emotional high of coming off a rivalry game like West Virginia did. And Kansas doesn't have to go from, playing at home to traveling. They're going to be back at home again in this one. So those are different. But Cincinnati's coming off the bye week this time. And that helps them prepare for a Kansas team that certainly runs a lot of, different actions, different motions. The defense is much more complicated now under DK McDonald. And all of those things are things that now Cincinnati has had an extra bye week to scout for, and are certainly going to help them in the matchup against KU. So I do think this is going to be one of those games where if KU needs to win, gulp, might need to be a 1-score win if you're Kansas. But we'll get more into the matchup throughout the week here for the Jayhawks against the Bearcats with Locked On Jayhawks. And again, tomorrow we're going to be joined by Henry Greenstein. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. Again, don't forget to check out Locked On College Football, or many of other Locked On shows, Locked On Big 12. You can check out Locked On Cincinnati for the Bearcats to get a preview of them as well. And see you next time on LOJ.